Yuka, an ordinary wife and mother, hides the dark side of her personality. Her intimate adventures attract not only the attention of men, but also cause intrigue and investigation. This is a detective story where every mystery and deception will be revealed to the very last details. Shortly before midnight, the mother of an underage daughter, a 35-year-old lady, appeared at Ribbington's house. The anxiety on her face could not conceal the woman's flourishing attractiveness. It was obvious that she had dressed in a hurry, hastily putting on jeans and a sweater, but she had forgotten about the cosmetic bag. Going to bed, Yuka, without much effort, made a U-turn. He'd been out of work for a month, his groceries were running out, his dough and shackle were running low. Smiling welcomingly, he let the guest into the apartment. Sitting on the sofa, she told a story that knocked her out of the rut for a long time. Her daughter Yelka decided to go to her grandmother for the weekend. It happened at the beginning of sunny August, and Yelka's heat was oats calm, slightly humid in the morning warm. She set off alone to hitchhike. The distance was easy, and last year she reached her grandmother in the same way. She was very fond of Yelka. She replenished her cell phone account, provided her with new CDs with movies, gave her money not only for the road. For 7 years, the granddaughter grew up without her father, who moved to another woman. How could he leave such a charming girl? Maybe the tomboy seduced her with money or something else. Grandmother's support helped to put up in difficult moments, and granddaughters not to lag behind in outfits from her peers. For this reason, Yelka was going on the road with a cheerful mood. Painted a little lipstick, pulled nail polish on her hands and feet. She wiggled her ass, even danced in front of the trellis, shaking her golden curls. Back from the house to the highway dropped off a neighbor, going to the mother-in-law living nearby. And there she was picked up by a clean-shaven young man in a tunic and light-colored breeches. The car was not new, but it was fast and looked good. When they approached the city, the driver turned down a country road, saying that he would pick up his sister and go on together. In Bereznik, the driver suddenly slowed down, stopped without stopping the engine, and raped Yelka. Then he drove her to the outskirts of the city and told her to get off. The daughter was not confused, remembered the number, and immediately went to the police. The rapist was detained on a hot trail. This when he was presented for identification, among other men of about the same age. She did not hesitate to recognize the offender. On the same day, a forensic medical expert issued a conclusion that the victim, who had not reached puberty, had been deprived of her virginity shortly before the examination. There are marks on the body characteristic of rape, evidence that you can't hide from. There is a small amount of physical evidence examined. Cum was found on the swim trunks, which the rapist didn't even take off. Forensics identified it as belonging to the owner of the car. A blood stain was found on the tufted seat cover. It's determined that the blood is the seal of Yelka's loss of innocence. Contrary to the obvious, the driver denied the rape charge. He only admitted that he gave the girl a ride into town at her request. The prosecutor had a solid basis to punish the perpetrator to the fullest. The file contained Yelka's detailed testimony about the rapist's actions in the birch grove. The dark glass hid them from the world, but the victim remembered everything. She unashamedly described the chauffeur's actions that took her by surprise. She desperately resisted, so he could not take off her swimming trunks, only opened with his left hand the place he needed. And suddenly in the court, hearing the victim, without warning her mother, changed her testimony, saying that the rapist was a driver from the military unit. She had traveled halfway to the city with him. He raped her and chased her out of the cab. Yelka had to vote again. She falsified her testimony because she was afraid of her mother. She couldn't tell her that under her skirt, she was forced to work by an unknown person, and even in the uniform of a private, of which there are thousands. She didn't remember the truck's license plate number. The car sped off, raising clouds of dust behind it. The deceiver was reprimanded at home, but did not reveal her secret. The court regarded the contradictory testimony as a signal that the victim was ready to forgive the offender. But her mother did not need it, as she had one daughter, and she gave her own strength without regret. Let the rapist get what he deserves. She was ready to pay if the detective could find out the reason for Yelka's obvious lies and restore the truth. The detective immediately explained that he was taking an advance payment, which in any case could not be returned. The visitor agreed, although it was obvious that for her it was not a trifling sum. Still, the woman's mood improved. Her cheeks turned pink, blood, and milk. It was as if she had handed over a part of her knife into strong masculine hands. And so it was in fact. After seeing his guest off, he managed to dig it out. The rapist had a semi-artisanal workshop for repairing vehicles. His wife left her job at the hospital after the birth of their firstborn. 3 years later, they had another child. The man remained the sole breadwinner in the family. The shop had a good reputation. That's all. Credible or not, you'll have to find out for yourself. Etham immediately called Joka's grandmother on her cell phone, who lived on a pension not far from him. He knew how to talk to the elderly, so it wasn't difficult to arrange a meeting. He traveled 2 stops on the streetcar and walked. The house is pre-flood, but it has an intercom. It's well renovated. The roof is re-roofed, with shiny new hinges and an intercom with a sign indicator and backlit keypad, not the usual old-fashioned way. He didn't have to wait long. The door opened from the inside, a woman carrying a trash can. The detective slipped into the entryway. The ceilings were high, the panels were freshly painted. There was no elevator. He went up to the 3rd floor and rang the bell at the apartment on the left. The grandmother who opened the door recognized Joka's mother's features with surprise. He did not doubt that in a certain number of years, today's client would be as wrinkled, sparsely haired, and yet retain the features of her former charm. The faded eyes looked not wary, but rather welcoming. She already knew that the stocky young man standing before her was helping her daughter to solve her misfortunes. You immediately found out what had happened to your granddaughter, Rupinkin inquired as soon as the hostess sat him down in a warm armchair. From it jumped a large shaggy cat. Yes, Dalishki on the side, and I salted for the winter pickles. And, like a madwoman, rushed to my dear. I got a mess. It's the night before. I saw a movie about a maniac, so I thought she'd run into the wrong people. And then you started to think differently. What's that? They're all the same damn thing. Is mirrored smeared. I'm worried about my granddaughter's well-being. I remember in our village, guys used to take down the gate if a girl went out before marriage. It was a disgrace. There it happened by consent, but here he already forced her to do it. Child. It's good that at least she didn't get confused, remember the number, and went where she needed to go. Does Joka have your temper, or what? No, son, not at all. I'm suspicious, cowardly. And my daughter, truth be told, doesn't cut off her heels. I broke up with mine once, now she's breaking up with mine. It's fate, I guess. And my granddaughter is just like her father. Quite reckless. I said, don't travel too often. You'll run into a bad man. It's God forbid. And she said, don't worry, Grandma. I'll break his balls with my shoe. So she did. When my father found someone else, she was very worried. Yoka? Of course she was worried. She was a little lost girl, always losing her toys. Then her father. When she grew up, she thought one of her wings was gone. Fatherless. I told mine to get over it. Thanks for the sake of the child. I'm sorry. Cheater. Where to? Dosi was in my eyes. We're divorced. He slipped away, didn't take anything from the estate. He paid his awimony neatly. The wrinkles near her eyes deepened, and Fem felt a leaden weight of bitter regret in her soul. A shaggy cat came up to his lay and started rubbing, leaving light-colored fur on his jeans. The guest almost began to console the old woman, almost said how charming, fresh her daughter. She has everything ahead of her, but in time bit his tongue. For even a rosy future is not able to return the only granddaughter, her chastity. The main thing in life happens only once. And how do you explain the refusal to testify confirmed by expertise? Nervous breakdown. The bumpkin didn't take into account the fact that he's looking at a school drill, for who even people are puppets for a while. I've been to see her 3 times, and it's hard for me. She can't explain anything. I told my daughter to take her to therapist, and she listened to you? Oh, well. She's used to measuring by her own standards. Of course, I work from morning till night, and no personal life. Everything for Yokai. And me, old hag. I'm no good. No help. If she'd remarried, things would have improved. The detective bade farewell to the hunted lady and her lily-livered cat. Not much of a catch. One good thing, the fog didn't lift. Maybe we can get to the Flint Road. The next step could be really dangerous. Knew from the internet where the rapist's workshop is located. So the owner, mechanic, and locksmith are one and the same. He didn't think it was necessary to keep a hired force. The income allowed not only to pay taxes correctly, but also to save something in the coffers. New expenses would certainly eat up this income. It's not easy to get it. For next to nothing, bought a few bowls for parts, which helped to save money. The detective got to the workshop in the suburban hamlet while it was still daylight. Smell a metal door, part of a massive gate, not even easy to open with a key. and what to do without a key when your hands are empty. I looked around carefully. There was no one around. Walked around the workshop on each side. Just expect ovulation. I noticed a metal plate at the bottom had been bent for some purpose. Bent for some purpose smelled like dog. Perhaps a sheepdog had been left on a chain overnight, and when strangers appeared, it barked and jumped out through the gap. Without thinking, I used all my strength to bend a corner along the old trail. The slate proved to be narrow. Trebinkin, with difficulty, squeezed through, getting dirty not only with Solito and fuel oil. He saw nothing interesting in the workshop. Above the pit stood an elevator, an old US brought in for repair. A not new foreign car was nestled on the side. It could have belonged to the owner. He can't afford a garage. That's a smart move. Get two birds with one stone. That could be in his neighborhood somewhere. The alarm system in the cabin seems to have been disabled in connection with the search that the operatives conducted. There was no cover on the seat, which means that this is where he spent time with Jolka. Yefim did not climb into the car for fear of leaving traces. The shelves were piled with spare parts and tools so oily that a wrench or a file would take a day to clean. The detective didn't risk touching anything, but in a deep hole under the asphalt US, simply called the Goat, he visited an underplate of metal, trampled by his feet into the oily earth and accidentally uncovered by him. He saw either a discarded subway pass or a sheet of paper folded several times, which had been accidentally dropped. The find seemed as dirty as everything around it. The detective picked it up. It was a notebook. One could hide it in his vest. He decided to clean it up by all means. Leaning on the edges, he pulled himself up on his hands, squeezed himself under the rear bridge, and climbed out of the pit. At the top, the floor is cement. The smell of gasoline, basement dampness seemed already a blessing. There was only one window in the workshop, a tall one, barred with thick bars. It was darkened, which meant that either a cloud had rolled in or evening was approaching. The detective slipped the find into his pocket where his cell phone was and climbed out through the gap. A woman in a purple jacket and massive sneakers was staring at him intently. So, her face could be described as both frightened and ferocious. A bulldog froze next to her right foot, ready to lunge forward at her mistress' command. Yifin immediately assessed the seriousness of the situation. The woman could have screamed. That would be worse than bad. He didn't have even the tiniest chance to get away from the dog if people came running. The first person who came rushing in would call the police while he fought off the bulldog. However, the woman didn't scream. She was confused and was in no hurry to let her protect her. To let her protect her off the chains, to be left alone. Rabinkin grabbed a pistol from his pocket. If you let the dog go, I'll shoot you. He wanted to tell her that he would shoot the bulldog, but the woman understood in her own way. Taking advantage of the confusion, the detective turned the corner of the workshop, holstered his gun, pulled off his windbreaker, put on the dark glasses he always carried in his pocket, and in half a minute blended in with the crowd. Only then could he catch his breath. I carried my jacket, with the lining turned outward on the bend of my elbow, all the way home. In the apartment, he changed his clothes, tried to wash the stains in the bathroom obtained in the workshop. Was she the landlady? Most likely, yes. Could she run to the police? Probably not. Nothing was missing from the workshop. Man looks like a homeless guy. Could have been imagining the gun. Some poor bastard scared him and took off. I wonder if she took the bulldog for a walk or brought him to guard the workshop. The woman could not bend the iron corner, because of which the detective almost got into the story and almost suffered from the bulldog's jaws. There was no time to ponder on the subject. He decided to scrutinize the miniature book, the only positive result of his adventure. The little book may have fallen out of the workshop owner's overalls when he was inspecting the goat's rear axle. On the first pages in ballpoint pen are written down the brands of engines, with their factory numbers, carburetors, batteries, steering, and braking systems. The last pages are different. There, in the same handwriting, women's names with pleases, and minuses were written in a column. After the plus or minus was a carelessly scrawled date, an Arabic number, and a month in Roman numerals. He found Yoke next to the name, a plus and a date, exactly the day she'd gone to the police. So he didn't put things on hold, logging his victories right away. Plus could be the rapist victims who didn't see fit to seek help. However, the same list could also include those who found payment in kind beneficial to themselves. 3 names each had 2 pluses against them. Of these, one woman was marked with an English letter, and probably it was not possible to find out her name. Where there were minuses, Probably the female passengers had rejected his solicitation. Be that as it may, the notebook opened the curtain on another field of the master's activity. He'd learned to capitalize on his frequent trips for spare parts. Among the 22 fellow travelers he entered in the Don Juan manuscript could find another girl raped but for some reason did not turn to law enforcement. The detective came to Yoka's house late in the evening as he had agreed with her mother. The girl had recently taken a bath. Just ringlets of blonde hair straightened, stuck to her shoulders. She wasn't wearing a bodice. Her tanned breasts stared steadfastly in one direction, namely forward. She was taller than her mother, greenish eyes, snub-nosed, puny fresh. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Are you a detective? She asked. Do you have a license? Of course I do. Yefim replied, entering a neat two-room apartment. There are carpets on the walls, and in the hall, there is a carpet on the floor. Will you drink tea? The guest realized that the relaxed atmosphere would allow him to find out what he was looking for and agreed. If she offered him a cigarette, he wouldn't refuse either. In the kitchen near the white table, without a tablecloth, there were 2 chairs. Ribington sat down on one. Yoka opposite. She poured boiling water into one cup, then into the other. She added brew and strawberry jam. Sugar to taste, she said, taking a sip from her cup. There were only 7 girls in my class when I was in school, 4 boys for each. So I was left without a bride, said Guest. You're very handsome. I don't believe any girl could prefer another. Yes, they did. I'm a bachelor now. How old are you? 24. You're not much older than me. You should take a waif of my age, maybe a classmate of mine. A man should be older. The girl seemed to like the subject, and he decided to pursue it. Ask about his father, and quietly move on to the main thing. He didn't want to sleep, and Joka seemed to go to bed past midnight. He drank 4 cups of hot tea without hurrying. Confession was answered by confession, and late, very late, a friendly farewell to a new acquaintance. Took her cell phone number just in case. The mother, losing patience, waited for the detective in the entryway. The multi-story house was falling silent. What did you find out? Everything. Your daughter was planning to sell her innocence for more money, dressed up in a short skirt, put on translucent panties. The driver was used to using the women he gave rise to. Here, look here. Yefim took out a brown notebook from his inside pocket. Yelka is listed in 22nd place. The previous ones, with the exception apparently, of 4 had gone along with his wishes. She tried to resist, but he'd already gotten into the swing of things and couldn't stop. That's exactly what she needed. The day before she had taken a contraceptive pill and did not fear the consequences of the adventure, she acted in cold blood. She memorized everything, including the license plate number, and she got what she wanted. The wife of the rapist and the mother of his children offered the victim a substantial sum for the change of testimony. She wrote a receipt stating that the money was received on that date. She deposited the earnings in the bank in her own name. So much for the daughter? What am I supposed to do? Take the book to the prosecutor's office, tell them you found it by accident where your daughter was raped. They'll run a graphological examination. They'll confirm the authorship of the notes. It's not impossible to find another rapist. Facts are more stubborn than Yelka, no matter what she says in her testimony. If you think the rapist deserves leniency, destroy the tapes.